Hi, everyone. We're getting your Wednesday up and going with the Closing Show Live. We're going to wait for some people to join us, but want to say hi. I'm Nadia Milani, VP of Marketing at Proposify, and I'm hosting our first Closing Show Live. So super excited. I have two sales rock stars here to join me. I have Alex MacLeod from Clearbit, and I have Scott Tower here from Proposify. We're wearing a Proposify gear. But we're just going to wait for 2 minutes before we get, not even, like 5 seconds, 10 seconds before we get started. So if you're there, dance with us. Do you know how to pump up the jam? Scott, do you know how to pump up the jam?
Not as good as you, Nadia. I can tell.
Al, do you know how to pump up the jam?
Pump up the jam. Pump it up. I got it.
Big deals. I know that.
That's right. I should put my swag on.
Seen it before.
Yeah.
Awesome. So we have some people joining us, which is great. Hi, everyone. So today we have our first Closing Show Live. I'm super excited. I'm hosting it. So what is the Closing Show Live? So we are talking to superstars and sales leaders and those in the trenches who are in the weeds on sales. It's a really fascinating time, as you may have been experiencing or not. Things are changing a little bit. The economy is slowing down. So it's really interesting point to talk to sales leaders and those who are, in the weeds, who are doing this every single day. So we're going to be talking about the challenges, tests that we've learned, and all of this is for you. So you can be better at sales and crush your close rates. So today, it's going to be exciting because we're talking to Al MacLeod, AE from an account executive from Clearbit, and we have our own Scott Tower from Proposify, who is our sales manager. Scott is customer growth at Proposify. He's works on the front line selling or front line to our sellers to generate new business. When he's not helping the team close, you can find him on the golf course or cheering on the Toronto Raptors. So you're a b-ball fan, Scott. Woo! Awesome. Al has a lot of experience, 10 plus years of sales experience, which is amazing. You started in field sales as an account manager, Al, which is cool. And then you moved quickly into software sales, focusing on new business. Al's worked in the gamut from complex year-long evaluations to one call closes. So I love that because we're going to get a lot of experience here. Al, welcome to the Closing Show Live.
Awesome. Thanks for having us. This is awesome.
Yeah.
Amazing. So I'm going to get to it. I'm going to ask the easy questions. I'm going to ask the hard questions. But let's start with the basics. So my first question to both of you is, what's considered to you a small deal and a big deal? Because I want to compare them and how to get from the small deals to the big deals. So let's go. I'm going to ask you, Scott, first.
Yeah, I think it all depends on the market you sell into. I think big and small is going to be different for everyone. When I think of big, I think of anything that's generally 2x or more of my annual contract value. So anytime I'm working a deal double the normal size that I would see, then I'm thinking, hey, that's a big opportunity for me. And then I guess a small deal would be something under my typical contract value that I would see. And I know when we first started the sales motion at Proposify, just to add context, a $3,000 annual contract was a big deal in our world. That was the big deal, which seems wild. And then obviously we started to move up market from there. And today we would look at that as a pretty small deal, right? So it's all context and where you're starting and what the market and segment you're selling into. But that's kind of how I look at it.
Do you agree, Al? So it really depends on the company you're working at, the industry.
Totally, right? I picture a standard deviation graph where your average deal size is going to be right at the top there. Anything that's kind of around that, standard deal, right? But then if you have 10K is your average deal, 1K would be a small deal, 100K definitely going to be a big deal. So I kind of see it as 4x your regular deal size, something that I'm not good at statistics, so I don't know the exact formula for that, but outside of the standard deviation would be a small deal versus large deal.
Amazing. So I want to hear the stories for both of you. So because both of you have had the experience working with the smaller, 1,000 ACV, 3,000, and then you now we're, I've seen us closing much bigger deals, 15K and up, so, or even higher than that. So I want to hear the story of like how did you become the seller where you were selling small deals, and what did it take you to sell the larger deals? So I know it's a hard question, many variables involved, but I wanted to get your 2 cents on that. So let's start with Al for this one.
Yeah, I'd say like with the smaller or more repeatable deals, you kind of get into a routine of, hey, maybe it's going to be 1 or 2 calls that you're going to make to close this deal. Maybe you're really just trying to understand, okay, what's the problem that's going to be solved here? All right, we can solve it. Let's ask for the signature. When you get into those larger deals, you have to pay a lot more attention to questions like the decision criteria, the decision process, understanding that you might have an initial call that really is just gathering information about what your solution can do. And you need to learn to advise your prospects and your clients on like what they should be thinking about when they enter their actual buying cycle. So you need to have the patience, I think, is the biggest thing that I've learned, to like foster those relationships with the prospects you're talking to, understand if they know what their buying cycle is like, and then kind of adapt to that.
But how do you build the relationships though? Like, so it is a longer cycle, but how do you exercise that patience, and how do you build that relationship, especially in a remote world?
Yeah, I think adding value, like trying to bring value to the table in every conversation, like when you're working those longer cycles, if you know your next call isn't for 3-4 weeks, have mapped out like what is important to each of these people and like how I can send them a Vidyard or a Loom in between your calls that are going to be like focused on what they care about, adding value the whole time without asking for anything in return. That was definitely something I had learned, because like in my shorter cycles, it was kind of like, hey, you're ready to buy? That's perfect. Like if you're not ready right now, maybe talk to you later, maybe not, but you weren't like continuing to foster that relationship if it wasn't an active opportunity. So that was definitely a shift.
Yeah, so I'm hearing a little bit like it kind of went from transactional, okay, this person's ready to buy, let's close this within like days. And then now this is taking much longer. I need to be proactive about building this relationship. How do I add value? And it works for me too. I'm a buyer. And those, I really do notice the difference between the transactional sellers and those who really do care about our business and what we're doing, and what pain points I have. So I love that. Scott, do you agree? Like, so is that, and I'd love to hear a story from you, like from when you were initially selling smaller deals, and what changes did you need to make as a seller to start closing like the big kahunas, as they call them sometimes?
Yeah, I think there's a couple of factors that go into that. I think one is what clicked for me was understanding the different selling models, or different ways that you can sell. And you alluded to it with transactional. That is like the way that you sell a deal that's small is typically transactional. It is more or less, here's what I got. Do you want to buy it? And then I think as you start to understand the other models around like solution sell and then more of a consultative sell, then you can start to identify the opportunities where that fits better. And I think as a seller early on, I didn't necessarily understand those differences. So you have to have some of those opportunities, and you have to see them fail and crash and burn, and realize you can't run, the $10,000 opportunity the same way as the $1,000 opportunity. And once you do that, you start to see it click. And for me, it was really understanding the frameworks from a guy called Jocko van der Koos, who wrote a series of playbooks around selling in software. And he really broke down those different models of how you would sell. And the thing that I found tricky in my experience with Proposify is that we straddled the different models all the time. When you're selling in SMB, you just see such a wide gamut of things that you are talking to someone who just wants to buy 2 seats one day, and you're talking to someone who wants to buy 20 the next. So again, you have to go from selling transactional to maybe it's solution, where it's just like, hey, if you can do these things, I'll buy from you. And then it goes all the way to, I think, what you resonate with, Nadia, which is more consultative, when someone's saying, hey, I understand your business. Here's how, I think you should evaluate this, or here's how I think you could actually solve this problem. Oh, and by the way, that's also with our software or whatever we sell. Right. So I think once you start to understand that a little bit more, it kind of changes how you look at opportunities.
Gotcha. Do you think it does matter though, like who you're selling to? So, and what I mean by that is, so me being the VP of marketing, does it change? So if you're selling to a manager at different levels, does it change your technique? Does it change your motion at all? If it's a C-suite, do you always go after consultative selling? What does that look like for both of you?
I think it depends on, maybe it's going to be budget, right? So if I'm selling to a VP and they have a budget allotment under like 40K, for example, like maybe we're able to turn that around fairly quick. Whereas it's funny, in my experience selling to C-suite, typically those were some of the quicker decisions. Whereas at the larger organizations, you're talking more with VPs who are putting together a buying committee, and like there's going to be much more of a thorough evaluation.
Yeah.
So I think it is more you really do have to talk to that business and ask them how these decisions are getting made with the organization. Like I know for one of the first big deals that I had closed, I think we had 3 or 4 calls, and at the end of every call, I was asking for the signature until the point where I just said, "Okay, wait, what do you need to get this project done?" And then my champion like laid out all the next steps for their decision-making process, which I then realized, okay, so let's map to this, created a mutual action plan, and realized I should be asking those sort of questions for these larger scale opportunities.
So good. You reminded me when I was a head of marketing at another organization I was purchasing. And I remember there was somebody who had reached out to me, and it was like literally they reached out to me at the exact moment where I had this pain. So for us, we needed to create like a lot of content for this account-based program. They sold me on the same, and literally I signed within like, I don't know, 15 days, not even. And that typically would have been a 30 to 60 day selling cycle. So that is funny how things can change. So 1 second here. I think we have a potential question here. Oh, amazing. Oh, wow. So we have lots of people here who are adding comments. We just figured this out. It's my first live. So we have a question here from the audience. So what are your all's favorite sales business books? We're reading Never Split the Difference right now, and it's amazing. So what I'll do is I'm going to stop from the conversational questions. And do any of you have any idea or any viewpoint on books, anything that you're currently reading? Never Split the Difference is something actually really great from a negotiation perspective. But I think Scott or Al, any comments on books that you're currently reading?
Gap selling is one I'll always go back to. I think it's great for the refreshers, especially like in this market right now. You want to be focused on like what business impact you can drive. So people aren't really buying just because something might look cool. So like the gap selling is always a good recommendation. What about you, Scott?
Yeah, I mean, the books that I constantly reference, and the one I mentioned earlier this is one of them. I literally have them right here because I'm always looking at them. But they're a set of playbooks by Jocko Vanderkoosh. Winning by Design is the company that sells them. So if you Google that, you'll find all the playbooks. Those are ones I'm referencing on a daily, weekly basis. In terms of books that I like from the account executive standpoint, one I really resonated with was Atomic Habits. Not as much about like how do you get a big deal closed, but it's all about consistency with sales and finding ways to build a system for yourself. So that's one that's applicable to like anyone in any role, but it definitely speaks to the salesperson as well in terms of just really building a structure around how you do everything. So I'd recommend that one.
Love that. So Pauline actually asked that, what was that book Scott mentioned? So Winning by Design playbooks, go check it out for those who haven't seen those before. So back to the smaller to bigger deals. So you made it sound so easy. And I'm going to call you guys on it. So can you just talk a little bit about the challenges for you personally, and as well as from a team perspective, from going from smaller to bigger deals, like from transactional to solution selling? What are the changes that need to be made, and what are the challenges?
I mean, I would say like where I was used to demoing and then having the next call almost be that proposal review. Getting into these larger evaluations, there were going to be more conversations around like a security review, wanting to review an MSA, like validating integrations, which is something that we had never done before. So while we would collaborate as a sales team with the larger deals, you really everyone has to be bought in and collaborate. So like, I remember a call that I brought in a technical writer to be our solutions engineer because we didn't have an actual solutions engineer. And I love this guy, and he would admit himself, he maybe isn't the most client facing person, kind of like that grumpy uncle, I would say. And so like, just not being prepared for what this evaluation really is going to entail. So like talking to your solutions, like your support team, talking to your CS team, like figuring out what sort of collateral you need to send over to these larger orgs, because they're going to be expecting like a formal MSA. So that was something like I was not ready for, like the resources and the kind of team selling approach that you need.
So good. That is like a huge thing with like cross-functional selling. Like, what do I need from marketing? What do I need from CS? Scott, do you agree, or did you have different challenges selling larger deals?
No, I think that is the biggest challenge. Is number one, I don't think enough reps like do the prep work to understand the people that you need to get involved. Like, again, you start to do a bunch of these deals and they look the same. There's usually the same type of players involved. So the first thing, the best thing you can do for yourself is do some prep work, do some research, think about who you think would need to be involved. Come in with a point of view when you talk to someone in a new opportunity. But I think that is the biggest challenge of, number one, understanding that all those people do need to be involved, and then how to keep them involved and keep them engaged. Al spoke a little bit to that earlier, how he would do that with video and things like that. But then you're also doing that internally. So again, you have to make sure that you can sort of wrangle the cats on both sides of the fence, and then work together, not only internally but externally, to get something done. Like, that's the whole reason it's called a mutual action plan. Like, there needs to be mutual buy-in, and it's your job to kind of make sure you get that. And it's hard early on, and I think it's something that you can. It's really easy to get what I call happy ears, because you may have one person that's like saying everything you want to hear, but you're not realizing like the groundswell that you need to create in the organization to actually make it a priority for the entire company and to make a pretty massive change. Because anytime someone buys something, they're obviously changing something, and if there's any significant investment to it, you're going to need a lot of buy-in. So yeah, that is, from my perspective, the hardest change to make, or the hardest thing to learn and master.
Sorry, go ahead, Al.
So I was going to say, like, to Scott's point there, like, and keeping in line with what the priority for your initiative is, right? Because as you're bringing more people into the conversation, they might have competing priorities, which your solution might touch on a bit, but then they might get misconstrued with what they're trying to accomplish. And so it's like really trying to pay attention to what these 8 people that are involved in the cycle care most about, and making sure that it all aligns to the common goal that you're trying to solve for. Because I know early on I had a couple deals that went by the wayside because of competing priorities that maybe we weren't aware of, and weren't focusing on like the actual decision maker's main goal. So it's, yeah, you definitely want to keep tabs on everybody that's involved.
So 100% I know the people who have done the research, and then those who haven't. And it's amazing how much more like I'll always connect with anyone that does an outbound outreach to me that has done the research, because I'm like, I really appreciate that. But so that seems really hard, like, to me. Like, how do you understand the pain points of all the people involved in that deal? Like, how do you get everybody on the same page? Is it researching every single person that's involved? Like, take me through what you do in that scenario.
Al, I know you had a pretty good tactic that you would use, at least prior to calls for this. So I'm going to tee that up for you.
Sure. Yeah. Like, that was also in adjustments, because when you're doing smaller deals, you might have 2 or 3 people. You can chat with them, build that bonding rapport, ask them what's most important to them. But then when you're getting into these larger scale deals, there might be 6 to 8 people. So what I would do is do a quick like teaser demo of sorts, send it over to my prospects so they kind of know what they're walking into. So kind of get them in their head in the right space for what we're focusing on and how I think it relates to their role based on my experience with others in that similar role. And just straight up ask them, like, as it relates to this overview, like, what's most important to you so we can focus our time. Because I'm not going to be able to spend that time at the beginning of the call chatting with these 10 people, asking them what's most important. So trying to do that prep work ahead of time, even if they don't get back to me, it's a great way to kind of start to form that bond. I know Nadia, you mentioned earlier, like building that relationship over Zoom, like just trying to get ahead of it in whatever way. So that was very successful for us.
So good. Any added points, Scott, to that?
No.
Real.
That's it.
Period. Love it. So I've heard this and I see this is that it's hard to sell larger deals. Like why is there that point of view out there? Why is that a misconception? Does it depend on the seller and just what their like natural, I guess, skill set is? Why do I always hear that it's hard to sell larger deals? Is that a myth? Is it an urban myth?
I think it depends, right? Yeah, I think if some reps, they don't have maybe it's the patience for it. Like I can see your ego taking a hit if you're used to putting 10 deals on the board every month. These longer deals are going to be more of a cycle. And so if your targets are monthly and all of a sudden you're working these larger deals, you're not going to have the same volume, right? So it's an adjustment overall in like your sales cycles, how you're speaking to people. So it definitely is a change in how you're selling. And I think it's just different sellers thrive in different environments, I suppose.
Yeah, I think it's partially that. And then I think there is an experience element too. Like, don't get me wrong. I think someone could be new to sales and come in and do really well selling larger deal sizes than maybe all of their colleagues. I do think it would naturally, they'd have to be pretty smart, I guess. But I think the partial part of it is after you've been into sales a while and you've worked some of those opportunities, you notice the pitfalls. And I think that's what we're hearing from Al, right? Is he's done a lot of that and he's realized what needs to happen to make those deals work. So I think for someone new into it and they're like, oh, this seems hard, what I would be doing is I would be leaning on, my team, my manager, other senior reps at my company, and really finding out what they've done to be successful with those. And that could probably speed up the learning and shorten the time to be able to consistently close those. But I think, yeah, it just takes another level of strategy, I guess, maybe than the smaller ones. So that's why people might look at it as hard, but it's more just thinking differently, I think, than you would with the small ones.
So I'm going to take you up on that. So you had mentioned reach out to senior people on your team, to figure out how to do it. But I'm curious for both of you, because you have been successful closing bigger deals. How do you structure your day? How do you structure your week? Like, how does that look like for you? And I'd love to learn a little bit more about that.
Yeah. So, I mean, my day, this is probably a no-no, but I don't stick to like strict time blocks. I know that works really well for people, but I want my calendar like available for bookings. But what I do every morning is I'll go through and put in 15-minute blocks for my tasks for the day. So what I've done ahead of time is I'll think through all of my accounts. If we have a date where we need a signature or whatever our next steps are, and think of, okay, what are the touch points that I can do in between those calls? And I'll have those listed in Salesforce. So then when the day comes, I put my 15-minute blocks in to make sure I have all those tasks on my calendar, and it keeps me really consistent and make sure that I am following up with these accounts if I do have a gap of like a few weeks between calls. So I guess I do my time blocking the day of instead of weeks in advance.
Gotcha. Scott?
Yeah, for me, I've always been big on just owning my time and not letting like prospects own my time. And a lot of that comes down to being able to prioritize the right things. I think sometimes we get so reactionary, like, oh, an email came in, or oh, this prospect wants to jump on a call. But I really try to ask myself, like, what is important for me to do today, and does that need to happen now? Because it just creates a bit of like a cascading effect if you start shifting everything, and it takes you away from what you had planned for the day. So a lot of times I would create like, these are the like 2-3 things I need to have happen today. And I basically worked out of, I'm not selling day to day now, so I'm kind of speaking to when I was. I would like work out of my pipeline like view in Salesforce rather than like a calendar or something like that. Like I would go there and be like, okay, these are my deals. What needs to happen for me to continue to move these forward? What can I do today for a certain, I'm not obviously going to do something for every deal. So what deals am I focused on? What am I going to do for those? And then I basically go to my calendar and do a version of what Al was describing as well. So you obviously have to map that with, hey, I got calls on my calendar. Like, it's not like I just have a wide open calendar. So I would always think about pipeline first. How am I moving my deals forward? And then how does that translate to my calendar and what I need to time block? And then, email was like one of the last things I looked at or thought about, because that's where I was just going to get into it like a tailspin of reacting to stuff, most of which 99.9% of which is not actually urgent, but you convince yourself some of it is. So I have the same feeling with Slack. As much as I love all my colleagues, like as a rep, you need to find a way to, again, build a system around how you work with Slack, make sure it's working for you and not against you. And I think those are the things that you have to find that sweet spot for yourself. But once you do, you can get in a good rhythm.
So good. So fail to plan, plan to fail, but don't plan so much that you're too stringent on oneself. So I love how that's actually really interesting how you go in, Al, on the day of and kind of plan that way. And Scott, I love the little tip about just going into your pipeline and kind of just that's a first priority. How do I move these deals forward? Such good tips. Okay, so I can't believe that we're almost like running out of time here. I feel like we've been talking for 2 minutes, but it's been longer than that. Apparently, time goes by fast. So I guess you're having fun. So we all have noticed we've seen it all over LinkedIn, and we have seen it in our peer circles. I have definitely noticed it that the economy is obviously changing. And that affects buying cycles. So I'm just curious, like, have you seen this? Like, have you seen buying cycles change recently? Has anything changed for you? Can you share how you are managing the economic slowdown?
I would say there's definitely been an effect. Deals that maybe we're planning to close have been pushed to like Q1, like with budget cycles, just things being on pause for the past few months. I mean, it seems obvious, but now more than ever, people really need to have a business impact to make a purchase. So the solution needs to be making them money or saving them money, or like reducing risk in some way. And you need to be able to accurately portray that in your presentation, in your proposal. Your champion has to have a really good understanding of that, because just because something looks cool isn't going to be enough to get it in the budget and like in times like this. So I mean, it's standard sales stuff, like get to the impact, get to the pain, but I think now more than ever it really needs to be like presented throughout the cycle.
Love it. Scott, anything to add to that?
Yeah, the only other thing I've noticed is sometimes deals are just shrinking. So you have to be a little bit more open to the land and expand type of model of, okay, let's get a customer in the door. Might be a smaller deal size up front, which is not necessarily what a new business account executive wants to hear. But I think in terms of benefit to the company, it's going to help their counterparts in CS, and then obviously still a good opportunity for the company to add revenue. So I think that's one thing that we've noticed. But yeah, I would resonate with everything Al said, and I just find when anything gets hard in any walk of life, like you go back to the basics, right? And the basics with sales are you need to be communicating value, and either solving a really big problem for your prospect, or at this time I don't even know how much people are resonating with gains, but if it was a gain rather than a pain, it would have to be massive.
I would say like be flexible, like get creative. If you've never done a paid pilot before, maybe it's a good time to try that out. If you haven't done quarterly billing, like maybe you can pay for the quarter now and then renew in the new year, like once things get started. So like obviously your team has to be on board with that, but like having that flexibility to get a bit more creative, it's important in these times.
Love it. So there's like that saying, simplicity scales, complexity fails. So just keep it to the basics, specifically in challenging times. I love it. Okay, so final thoughts. Can't believe it. So what's one thing that you want the audience to take away to help them close those big whales. So I'm going to throw it to Al and Scott, and then we're wrapping it up after that. It's crazy.
Yeah, I would say like start working your deals now as if they are larger deals. So even if there's only 2 people that you're selling to in your account, map out what's most important to them. Start thinking about sort of value adds you can send them throughout your cycle and sort of map out, even if your next call is within 2 weeks. So like start thinking about those, I guess the value adds you can do in your deals today.
I'd recommend using a mutual action plan for any opportunity that feels outside of, actually even at your normal ACV. It's a great way to make sure those deals go the way you want them to, but a mutual action plan is essentially mapping out each of the steps. I think as you get more granular in your steps, there's a saying, I think I heard it from Kevin Dorsey, that's aim small, miss small. So if you know all the little steps, if then something goes off track, it's only going to go off track a little bit, and you're not going to jeopardize your whole opportunity. So mutual action plans, you should be using them if you're not.
Love it. So thanks everyone for joining us today. Thank you, Scott. Thank you, Al. You're our first inaugural Closing Show Live. Join us next week. We'll be back. We have Will Aiken from SalesFeed, who's going to tell us how to use your own brand and sell yourself to sell the big deals and to close faster. So thanks everyone.